16 minutes past 8 is the time. The toxic waste poisoning in the town of Corby in Northamptonshire has been described as one of the UK's biggest environmental scandals.
So in 1980, the town's huge steelworks was shut down. 200 million tonnes of toxic waste was transported through the area, often in open lorries.
Nearly a decade later, mothers in the town began to report that their children were being born with birth defects, which sparked a number of families to take legal action. And their battle for justice has been turned into a new television series. Tim Muffet has spoken to 3 women who led the campaign.
I don't think people of Corby realise just how much they have been affected by this.
This is a story of toxic waste.
Hopefully they will now.
And shattered lives.
And hopefully they'll see why us mothers had to stand strong and do it.
Almost 30 years ago, Susan, Maggie and Tracy gave birth to children with physical abnormalities.
My son Connor was born with one hand, the left hand was not there at all. No fingers, no nothing.
My son Sam was born and he was born with a club foot. He has been in lots of agony with it. It's a lifelong thing that he has to live with. As a mother, you just think, you know, oh my goodness, why has this happened?
Shelby was brought to me and told us that, unfortunately, she had a deformed heart, and as opposed to it being a 4-chamber heart, it was only a 2-chamber heart. There was deformities within the kidneys and the liver. We were then asked if either of us worked with any toxins or toxic waste, to which we said no, because we didn't believe we did do.
Shelby died when she was 4 days old.
Afterwards, we both threw ourselves back into work. I saw in the newspaper that, you know, there's toxic waste was going on at Corby, and it just stopped me in my tracks.
In its heyday, Corby Steelworks was the biggest in Europe. Its blast furnaces and coke ovens sprawled across hundreds of acres. When it closed in 1980, 11,000 people lost their jobs. There was intense pressure to regenerate the area. The old site, with its lead and zinc waste, was cleared away, sending polluting clouds into the atmosphere.
Me and Susan, we met in the hospital, and her husband was actually Peter, who I worked with right next door to where the main works was being done. 2 of us in the same workplace. One's got deformity of the hand, my daughter's got internal deformities, ear deformity, and all the pieces just started to come together as a big jigsaw.
We will build a town for the people of Corby on the back of a rapid reclamation of the steelworks.
Sometimes children are just born different.
Toxic Town, a new Netflix drama, tells the story of what happened in Corby.
You want my advice about whether there's a legal case to be fought or not?
What was it like when you saw this show?
It was emotional.
Strange. Yeah. To see your life being played out by somebody, it's really strange. But I think all of us, you know, not just us 3 mums, it's for all of the mums, it does need telling.
In the series, Susan is portrayed by Jodie Whittaker.
My son has been in pain his entire life, and it wasn't his fault.
Amazing to see your story come to light on screen.
I'm looking around this room and I see mother after mother.
Mrs. McIntyre.
Did you meet Jodie Whittaker before she played you?
Met her, she's lovely. She says, I'm actually nervous. And I said, well, I'm nervous as well. And she says, well, she's not as nervous as us.
Corby Borough Council denied that there was any link between the clean-up operation and the cluster of birth defects in the area. In 2009, the High Court ruled that the council had been negligent in managing the toxic waste and that there could be a link. The council initially appealed against that decision, but dropped its appeal the following year when it reached out-of-court financial settlements with the families of 19 young people born with birth defects.
The High Court's decision against Corby Borough Council was a legal landmark. For the first time, a court had established a link between toxic waste in the atmosphere and birth defects. Previous cases had all involved polluted water.
Justice has to be possible, and I am far from done.
Rory Kinnear plays Des Collins. the lawyer who represented the mothers and helped them win their case.
Amazing women. All they had was belief and commitment. They didn't know the law, they didn't know the science, but they knew the science and the law had to come together to protect their children's future, and they were prepared to fight for that.
Tell them what they did to you. What they did to your kids. You tell them the truth.
Do you think there's been a lack of understanding about how big a deal this was, about the impact it had?
Yes, definitely. We know what we went through, so we'd like to help others.
Tracy knew somebody across from her with a child with a foot deformity. I know somebody that was only born about 6 months before Sam with a club foot. So there are definitely other people who didn't come forward at the time or who don't know, never got to hear about it.
There's probably parents out there like us that are blaming themselves for their child being born with a deformity.
This is a battle for the kids because they don't have a choice.
Renewed focus on an environmental scandal.
I'm here for them and the damage my council did them.
For Susan, Maggie and Tracy, it's long overdue. Tim Muffet, BBC News.
Let's talk about this more. George Taylor was born in Corby with a limb defect. Narrator of the BBC podcast, The Toxic Waste Scandal. Morning to you, George. Also, Solicitor Des Collins. Des, you were in the piece we saw just a moment ago, who worked on the case for many years. Now, we were just talking a moment ago. You two, I sort of assumed that you might have seen each other over the years.
I've seen him, but I don't think he remembers seeing me.
But
he was a bit small.
A bit smaller?
Yeah, I was maybe 7.
Yeah.
OK, which would have, time-wise, when would that have been?
Oh,
that would have been in
the 2000s.
Yeah, about 2000s. We were working on the case. I can remember distinctly going up to Aberdeen and going to your parents' house, and your dad very kindly took me back to the airport. I always remember that.
Yeah. And the reason, just so people understand, you moved from Corby to live in Aberdeen, which is where you live now. Tell us what you will about how it's affected you and how it happened.
Yes, I mean, I was born with all 5 fingers on my right hand, but my thumb and index finger weren't able to bend, which caused extreme sort of pain. That sort of pain, if I hit it, it would be gut-wrenching, almost vomiting on the floor things. And I grew a tumour on my hand, which came back twice and basically resulted in losing half my hand, or 3/5 of my hand, and my middle finger being transplanted on to the base of my thumb, sort of to create that grip and that sort of...
So you went through a lot of trauma. When did you and your family sort of make the link between what happened in Corby and what happened to you?
So it took a good few years, maybe when I was 6 or 7, I think it was towards the late 90s, my mum got sent a newspaper cutting by a friend who was still in Corby, and it had sort of one of the first stories, which was a few of the first mums that sort of had noticed, oh, there's something wrong here. Was sent that. I think it had Des's information on there, and then that's where my mum made the first contact with Des and the solicitor team.
Pick up the story, Des, because how did you get to be involved?
Again, it's newspaper. And the Sunday Times loves telling this story at the moment because I was lighting a fire at home and I was using the previous day's Sunday Times. And before I put it on the fire, I looked at it and thought, oh, there's an article about Corby. And what it was an article about the journalist had been up in Corby trying to look at corruption on the council. And looking at corruption in the council, it started fiddling about with the fact that there were birth defects. And I couldn't believe that that story had not been told before. So I, in fact, knew the journalist quite well because I was doing other work with him on another case. So gave him a ring and said, where do we go from here?
Did you have any idea of how big it would be in terms of the David-Goliath kind of battle?
None at all. I mean, you know, I probably wouldn't have bothered if it. Well, I probably would have done even more, actually. But no, I didn't. No, I thought it was possibly something that might last a couple of years. I didn't. I mean, this was 1999. We didn't finish the trial for 10 years, and then we had the appeal and the mediation following the appeal, and then we had to deal with all the damages coming into because the damages were all payable to children, so they all had to be protected and paid into court. So it took a long time. Yeah, about 12 years away.
Your dad?
Yeah.
So, because a lot of people wouldn't have got this from the film. What was happening is that people were working in certain parts of Corby and not told about the environmental problems that were going on. So tell me about where your dad had worked, because he worked at the plant previously.
Yeah, so my dad had previously worked in the steelworks, sort of served his apprenticeship and worked in the steelworks for quite a few years. But at the time of the clean-up, he actually ran a pub in the local area, which him and my mum ran together. And they always speak about this big circular car park around it, where the trucks that were driving the waste from the land.
And we said they were open trucks.
Open topped, not clean. My mum always remembers this thin film of dust that would be on the tables in the car park, on your cars, which was one of the things that got me in the Netflix show, was they do that quite well with the windows, well, that fine orange dust.
You see them washing and then there's a bowl of red
Yeah, and that's
water.
what my mum's always spoken about, but obviously I wasn't there, so seeing that visualised was quite interesting. And
so they basically were affected from people coming in and into the pub?
Yeah, so, I mean, it was mainly these trucks that were driving, say, through the town, and the dust was just falling off of the wheels, off the back. And if it was wet, it would fall down, then dry, and then the dust would pick up, and it would just spread around the town, and the mums would then inhale.
There'll be a lot of people, George, sort of hearing about the story for the first time, effectively, because, as Des said, it hasn't been out there so much. People haven't heard of it. Do you and your family, have you ever felt satisfied with where it's ended in terms of what's ever been said to you about accountability?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things I think you hear it from a lot of the mums, the kids, that there was never a full and proper apology. There's things like post the court case, the council came out and sort of almost put a target on the backs by saying that the people of Corby will have to pay more in council tax because they've lost the case. And to do that sort of quite immediately afterwards was quite sort of, some might say, heartless or miscalculated at the time. And I think that's the thing that, again, maybe less so for us as the kids because we were young, but for the mums and dads, that's probably what.
And do you see that when you talk to your mum?
Yeah, I mean, I see that in interviews that my mum and dad have done sort of over the years. I see it with the other mums that speak quite often. That's one of the big things that they always speak about.
It doesn't feel how much, does it, given what people have been through, for there to at some point been an apology? A straight up and down apology?
No, the attitude of the council throughout, and clearly it was a long time ago now, was this is something and nothing. The mothers are doing something which they shouldn't be doing. They're prejudicing the rest of the community. And one of the shocking parts of it was that they always said throughout the court case, if you can prove that we did something wrong, then we'll put our hands up. So we go through a 12-week trial. The judge says, yes, you did something wrong. And I asked them to put their hands up, and no, they didn't.
It's the series is I've seen you and I have both seen the first. No, you've seen all of it. You've seen the first.
Yeah.
And you're happy?
So far, yeah.
It's well done. It's very well done. I mean, they've got a lot of money. I mean, that doesn't mean that it wouldn't be well done.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
exactly, yeah.
It is very well done. It's very professional and it's very accurate within parameters. Yeah.
Thank you both so much for joining us on the sofa. George Taylor. Now, George is the narrator of the BBC podcast, The Toxic Waste Scandal. That will be on BBC Sounds from Tuesday. It's 8 episodes, isn't it?
8 episodes,
Next Tuesday. And also, of course, there is the Netflix series Toxic Town, which will be available...
From today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's see, time now is 8:30 Morning Live, following breakfast on BBC One this morning.